Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my walkthrough on how I drew Nightwing. You are welcome to use any of these tips, advice, techniques, all of that good stuff for your own original artworks, and let's get to it. So I started off with a canvas of I think 300 dpi because I kind of wanted a large size to work with. I zoomed out really far because I didn't want to focus on the anatomy, I didn't want to focus on all the details, I just wanted to see where his body was going, the general gesture, the pose. I didn't really care about all the details just yet. And when I finished with that, I made a new layer and I zoomed in a little bit, and I kind of just refined a little bit of things, but it's still not that detailed of a sketch. I'm still not too concerned about how things are looking. I'm just trying to lay down the general picture of what I'm aiming for. The brushes I used for this, I believe, was a hard round. It might have been a more soft round, but the entire picture, it was drawn with a soft round brush, a hard round brush, the smudge tool. I'll put a link in the description for how I use that. I have a tutorial made on that already. But anyway, so just again, zooming in some more, going back in with some details. I had up a separate window with a bunch of tabs open for a bunch of references, which I highly recommend. Even if you consider yourself pro, like pros use references. Come on guys, this is really important. So I had references for a fist, I had references for the abs, I had references for the pose, I had references for absolutely everything. And that's okay. That's not cheating. That's how you get better at art. I knew I wanted to make this piece lineless, so that was another thing. I wasn't too concerned about how clean my sketch was looking because it didn't matter. I was going to not include the sketches in the final piece anyway. There were loads of different references for Nightwing's outfits. A lot of people went pretty original with his design, but I didn't really want to do that, so I just kept it kind of simple. By this point, I kind of realized this wasn't the image that I was aiming for. I was like, okay, maybe I might want to make this a print someday, so I'll go ahead and make it a 12 by 18, which is what I just resized right there. So I had to cut some things off to make it fit, and then I had to readjust things and kind of lengthen the legs so that they would all fit. And right now I'm using the lasso tool. This is where I'm going to be just kind of selecting everything inside the body, where I'm going to put down a flat color of just a neutral gray. This is because I'm, again, not going to be using the sketch. I'm going to be doing a painting. Just to make things visually easier for me to see, I had a orange tinted background and a blue tinted base, and since those colors are complementary, they pop a lot better, so it's just a lot easier to see what you're doing. You want to go with the neutral colors for just your flat bases because you could skew, including your background, because you could skew your eyes into seeing something darker or lighter than it actually is. This is a good base to kind of keep things neutral. So I quickly laid down the rest of the flats, and now I'm going in with a softer brush and just laying down really messy shadows. I'm not trying to be clean. I'm just trying to see where my values are. It's the early stage. This is gonna look pretty messy in the early stage, so it's definitely not something to worry about. I'm just trying to get a general bearing of this picture and kind of just get used to it and accustomed to working on it. And yeah, it looks kind of scary, but you just keep working on it, you just keep refining things, and yeah. Now that part, I didn't like how skinny he was. That's kind of my own fault. I tend to draw guys with more feminine-like bodies. So that's just my own ineptitude of anatomy skills. So I just did some little adjustments there to fix that. I used the lasso tool and then the transform tool. I think I used distort, and I could just kind of dragged it out. And that's how I fixed it, and then I just went quick over it just to fix any sort of discrepancies with the picture. And now I'm going back into the face where I'm doing a bit more refining, adding some more darks, kind of just starting to do the whole rendering process. This whole time I have the sketch layer pretty turned down in terms of opacity. I don't want it to be distracting me, and I don't want it to be covering what I'm painting, but I do want it there for a general reference. The further along I get in the painting process, the more I'll lower the opacity or just completely turn it off. A lot of this is mostly just me laying down the colors and the values, and it's all very messy. I'm going to be blending it later. I'm just trying to as I said, map things out, try and get things just a general gist. You probably noticed I've been flipping the canvas back and forth. I do this to check any mistakes. Oftentimes if you're staring at a drawing too long in one direction, you're not going to realize if there's anything wrong. So flip it, kind of refreshes the image in your mind, and you'll end up seeing some mistakes that you otherwise would not have. So now I'm just keep going back in and adding more details, refining things. At that point, Alex was like, his head is too big. So I went in and I used a lasso tool. I shrunk the head. I still even have some of my references at this point still open, just to kind of see how shadows were to fall on different parts of the body. It's still very sketchy, still very messy. All of this blending comes in later. I'm really just trying to get the values right now. I kind of struggled a bit with the legs just because I couldn't find the references that I liked for it, for particularly muscular legs in an angle that I would have liked, and I could have done more research in terms of figuring out the muscular structure of the human body, which I should have done, but I didn't do, so that was kind of my own fault. So a lot of this just comes down to patience and just laying down those messy colors and not worrying about how nice it looks just yet. You really want to just figure out the drawing and where you're going with it and what your values are going to be. Now for this next part, I am doing the background of the city. I'm laying down my perspective grids, and I'll put a link in the description for a tutorial on how to do that. I started out by just drawing some basic rectangular shapes, and then I'm skewing it to try and match the perspective lines that I've created. I did black and white just so it could stand out, just so I could see what I was doing. That's the only reason I picked those colors. At least at first, but I ended up keeping them later. And now I'm adding some grays just to kind of show where these buildings are extending to, just so I could see what things look like. And then I'm just kind of refining some edges. Then adding a couple of details at the top, like just some antennas and just random stuff. Adding in some lights and just general lines just to make it look like something. I ended up getting too frustrated with it at that moment, so I needed a break, and that's totally fine to take a break and to switch on something else. And here's where I start to blend the shading, where things start to look a little bit nicer. And again, link in the description to a tutorial where I talk about how I blend in Photoshop. Same method that I still use, even though it's been many, many years. In terms of choosing color, what I normally do is I take the flat base color, I go slightly darker, slightly more saturated, and slightly in a different color family. So if it's red, I will take that red, go a little bit darker, a little bit more saturated, and maybe I'll drag it into the oranges or into the purples, just to give it a bit more life depending on the color scheme that you're going for, and to make it just more interesting looking. I was trying to be careful when I was blending just in general, because I do want some lines to be a hard shadow and some lines to be a soft shadow, because life includes both kinds of shadows, and it's important to try and find a balance between the two. I don't want to overblend and make it too soft, because then he'll just look blurry and like blah. So I need some parts of it to look more harsh and hard. You've probably noticed that I'm doing a lot of this either on one layer or making a new layer and then eventually combining it together. That's my preference. I really hate working on a lot of layers. It's too disorganized for me, and it's too messy, and it murders my poor computer, which already has to run in Photoshop. So I usually typically use only a couple layers if I'm painting at most. Totally a personal preference thing. If you like using multiple layers, all the more power to you. So I didn't touch on it, but I did refine the shape of his, what are they called? Little stick thingies. I can't think of the name right now, but they have a name. I was trying to go for a metallic look, so that's high contrast. I have a tutorial on metal, link in the description below if you want to look at that. I probably could have used a higher contrast, but oh well. I don't know if I touched on this, but occasionally with this drawing I did go into image adjustments and I think auto contrast, but you don't have to do that. You can manually do it yourself by adjusting the levels on a separate adjustment layer. I talk about that in another video of mine, which I will also link in the description down below. It's a different tutorial video of a different topic, but I included it in that tutorial. It's just to make sure my values are nice and strong. And now that I'm working on the hair, what I found is going from dark to light seems to work best, at least for me, and trying to get locks and just general flow of the hair down. I'm using pretty soft brushes, and I use highlights a lot smaller with smaller brushes, and less of them the lighter it goes. I'm also tossing in a few random strands with a really small brush of just going in a different direction, really small but of the bright color, just going in random directions, just kind of show random strands. Now back for the background, I'm adding in some clouds to get myself more comfortable with working on it again, and then just going in and adding in some lights because I thought of more ideas when I took my break and it made me feel better, so I was like, yeah, I'm willing to work on this again. So it's always great to take a break if you need it. And now I'm just kind of fiddling around with what I want to do in terms of color for the background. I was thinking maybe I wanted something orange because his outfit is blue, but then the more I worked on it, the more I realized it just wasn't feeling right to me, so I pretty much just went with a bluish purple sort of look, and the whole picture just ended up being blue, like aside from his skin, but that's okay because it's still, you know, it still worked out. So now I'm going in, adding a lot of blues, trying to really get in that color everywhere. I also want to make sure that he feels a part of the scene, so I'm trying to add in some smoky clouds in front of him, and now I'm going in with even a brighter brush to kind of emphasize that lights are on in these buildings, and I'm blurring a copy of that layer to kind of give it that glow, and then adding in just a layer of a white gradient to kind of increase that glow to just city life it sort of thing. And now I'm just doing some adjustments to the colors and the values just to kind of make it stronger. And now for this, I used a regular hard round brush, set it to scatter and like insane spacing, I think is maxed on both, and just did a cluster of stars. And you want to make sure they're kind of grouped together, and I also didn't want them to go over the clouds because they're supposed to be behind the clouds, despite the fact that you wouldn't see stars in the city like this. But that's why I did the stars. And now I'm just kind of going back in with a brush and just slightly adjusting some colors and then adding some more glow and light. You'll notice here that I have a lot of layers. That's because I'm uncomfortable with this, and having to make adjustments is a scary thing. So for like something I'm familiar with, I won't have a lot of layers, but something that's new, then I typically will. Now I'm coming in with I think it's a pure white brush actually. It's a hard round brush, and I'm going in and just adding in all of the backlight. I don't want to go too far into his body because I don't want, the light is not just like enveloping him, it's just kind of hitting the outside. So I'm kind of keeping in mind where would the light be hitting and how far would it reach in. And if you want to find references for that, totally recommend it. I didn't use any references for this. Probably should have, but I still kind of like the end result anyway, so it ended up being okay. I'm making sure to cover like his entire body and following his form to the best of my ability. And you can keep it sharp like this with a hard round brush, or you can do what I'm going to be doing in a little bit, which is softening it up. And then I didn't like the nose and I kind of forgot to fix it, so I went in and did an adjustment. That's just Control-T for transform, and then the warp tool. Then going in with the final highlights of just the hair and the face, any part that would be catching the city lights. And now I'm blending it, again, the same way I have been blending this entire time, doing a bit of color adjustments and erasing some of the highlights just because some of them were a bit too much. And I'm being very meticulous with how I am blending it because I want to have those sharp outside highlights, but I want the inside of the white to be blended out. I'm trying not to blend it too much, I'm just trying to give it like a little bit of a soft texture, just to kind of match the rest of the piece. I kept a few hard lines on the inside, mostly where they kind of make a little triangle. I don't know how else to describe it, like on his abs. I blurred the bottom but not the top bit of the triangle. And now I'm taking the color adjustments that I did on the background and bringing it to the foreground so he better matches the background. And I clipping masked them so they would only appear on him, so they wouldn't double on the background. Some color adjustments in the hair, just to make it look not so black and white. And then I'm adding in a few white speckles just to kind of have this sort of glow. And then I added a sort of a cross highlight on the metal sticky mahooger that he carries. I still can't remember the name. Just to add some sort of interest to it and kind of show off that yes, this is metal, despite the fact that it doesn't 100% look like it. And now I'm just fixing up the blue because I kind of didn't mess enough with it. And flip the image, and that's pretty much it. So hopefully you found this walkthrough helpful. If you make anything based off of this, feel free to link me down below. I would love to see all of your wonderful creations. And if you guys want to see more walkthroughs like this, also just let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye!